Imagine it. It 1944. Delegates from 44 Allied nations are gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel in Breton Woods, New Hampshire. Inside that room, they are about to make a decision that will shape the global economy for the next 80 years. Britain, the world's financial superpower for over 2 centuries, is broke. Its national debt has soared to 249% of GDP. After 2 devastating world wars, the empire that once ruled the seas is financially exhausted, and everyone in that hall knows it. So they do something that has only happened a few times in history. They transfer global reserve currency status from one empire to another, from the British pound to the American dollar. But this wasn't just a financial handover. It was the continuation of a pattern that has repeated itself for more than 5 centuries, a predictable cycle of rise, peak, overextension, and collapse. Every world reserve currency has followed this same life cycle. And today, the US dollar is showing the same warning signs that preceded the 4 before it. To understand what's coming, we need to go back. In 1450, the Portuguese real became the world's first true reserve currency. For about 80 years, Portugal dominated global trade. This wasn't luck. Portugal had revolutionized navigation and global commerce by charting new sea routes to Africa, Asia, and the Americas. After the fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans in 1453, the old spice routes were blocked. Portugal found a way around, literally, sailing around Africa and opening a new age of discovery. Lisbon became the center of the trading world. The Portuguese real was accepted across continents, from Europe to Asia. At its peak, Portugal's empire stretched across Africa, India, Malaysia, Japan, and even into China through Macau. But as always, success led to overreach. Maintaining military outposts on 4 continents drained Portugal's treasury. Competition from the Dutch, British, and French grew fierce. Then a royal succession crisis in the 1530s destabilized the kingdom. By 1580, Spain absorbed Portugal into the Iberian Union. The Portuguese real had ruled world trade for 80 years, and then it was gone, replaced by Spanish silver. Spain's rise began with the discovery of the richest silver deposit in the world, the mountain of Potosí, high in the Bolivian Andes, discovered in 1545. It produced nearly half the world's silver between 1575 and 1635. The Spanish minted their pieces of 8 in Potosí's mint, marked with the letter P. These coins became the first truly global currency. The Spanish dollar became the most stable and trusted coin in the Western world from the 16th to the 19th century. It even served as legal tender in the United States until 1857. Spain's dominance lasted roughly 110 years, from the 1530s to the 1640s, but then the familiar pattern appeared again: overextension and crushing debt. Charles I thus had left his son Philip II a mountain of debt, 36 million ducats, with an annual deficit of another million. Philip II defaulted on Spain's loans 4 separate times. The endless flow of New World silver created massive inflation. Prices in Spain quadrupled during his reign. When the supply of silver dropped by half under his successor, Spain's economy crumbled and bankruptcy followed again. By 1641, the Iberian Union fell apart and Spain's monetary dominance ended. A new financial power was rising, the Dutch Republic. In the 1600s, Amsterdam became the world's leading financial hub. The Dutch guilder, backed by innovation and trade, emerged as Europe's de facto reserve currency. The Bank of Amsterdam introduced efficient, trustworthy systems for international payments. Dutch merchants and investors pioneered modern finance itself. They created the world's first stock exchange, marine insurance, and new instruments like acceptance credit and publicly traded company shares. From 1642 to 1720, roughly 78 years, the Dutch guilder dominated world trade, accounting for more than a third of all international transactions. But even the Dutch fell into the same trap. Military overreach, especially during the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, bankrupted the country. The Dutch East India Company collapsed under the strain of its conflicts with the British. By the late 1700s, Britain had risen to take its place. The pound sterling, backed by industrial power and a vast colonial empire, became the next global reserve currency. For over 2 centuries, from the 1720s to 1944, it ruled world trade longer than any currency in modern history. At the height of British dominance, Over 60% of world trade was invoiced in pounds. London was the global hub for insurance, commodities, and investment. The gold standard further strengthened the pound's supremacy. By 1922, the British Empire controlled a fifth of the world's population and a quarter of its land mass. Britain's financial power seemed unbreakable. Then came the familiar decline. World War I exploded Britain's national debt from $650 million in 1914 to over $7 billion by 1919. The Second World War was even more catastrophic. By 1945, government debt reached 270% of GDP. Britain had won the war, but lost its financial crown. Which brings us back to Breton Woods in 1944. Over 700 delegates from 44 nations gathered to rebuild the global financial system. Their agreement created the International Monetary Fund and what we now know as the World Bank. The Breton Woods system tied every major currency to the US dollar, and the dollar itself to gold at $35 per ounce. The transition from pound to dollar was now official. For the next quarter century, the US dollar reigned supreme until 1971, when President Richard Nixon suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold. The gold standard was gone, but the dollar didn't collapse. Instead, it found a new anchor: oil. After the 1973 OPEC oil crisis, the U.S. struck a strategic deal with Saudi Arabia. In exchange for American military protection, Saudi oil would be priced and sold exclusively in U.S. dollars. By 1975, every OPEC member had agreed to do the same. Thus, the petrodollar system was born. Because every country needed oil, every country needed dollars. This artificial global demand allowed the U.S. to run massive deficits that would have crushed any other nation's currency. For decades, dollar dominance was unquestioned. At its peak in 2000, over 70% of the world's foreign exchange reserves were held in U.S. dollars. But now the numbers are shifting. By 2024, that figure had fallen to 57.8%. Foreign investors' share of U.S. Treasury holdings has dropped from over 50% during the 2008 financial crisis to just 30% in early 2025. De-dollarization is accelerating. The BRICS nations have expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. Together, they're building financial systems that bypass the dollar entirely. As of 2025, 10 BRICS members and 13 partner nations are developing the BRICS Bridge Payment Network. Meanwhile, America's own balance sheet is under strain. As of March 2025, U.S. public debt stood at $29 trillion, with another $7.4 trillion in intragovernmental holdings. That's $36.4 trillion total, or 124% of GDP. And here's the pattern again. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, and Britain all followed this same trajectory, averaging about 95 years of dominance. The US dollar has been the reserve currency for 81 years since Breton Woods. We're approaching the historical turning point. Every reserve currency has passed through 4 stages: rise, peak, overextension, and collapse. Stage 1, rise. A nation gains dominance through innovation in trade, finance, or military strength. Portugal mastered navigation. Spain had silver. The Dutch built modern finance. Britain industrialized. America rose through post-war industrial might. Stage 2, peak. At this stage, the reserve currency becomes nearly universal. The empire seems untouchable. Stage 3, overextension. This is where the cracks appear. Massive military costs, spiraling debt, and waning productivity. Spain defaulted repeatedly. The Dutch bankrupted themselves fighting Britain. Britain's debt hit 270% of GDP. The U.S. today carries debt at 124% of GDP and has spent trillions on wars. Stage 4, collapse. The reserve currency loses trust and power shifts elsewhere. Every empire has faced this reckoning. What happens next? History offers clues. Portugal never regained its influence. Spain fell into centuries of decline. The Netherlands remained prosperous but shrank to a regional power, and Britain saw its empire dissolve and its global dominance fade after 1945. By the 1950s, 55% of global reserves were still held in sterling. Within 2 decades, that share had dropped sharply. Transitions like this don't happen overnight. The US overtook Britain economically long before the dollar replaced the pound. The same slow shift may be happening again, this time with China and an emerging multipolar world. Every reserve currency's lifespan has averaged around 95 years. The US dollar is now 81 years into its run. The signs are all too familiar: declining global share, shrinking foreign treasury demand, BRICS alternatives rising, and an overextended military presence with 900 bases in 130 countries. The pattern that has defined 5 centuries of economic history is repeating. The only question left is how fast the transition will unfold and who will lead the next financial era. Will it be gradual like Britain's slow descent, or sudden like the Dutch collapse? Will a single new power emerge, or will the future be multipolar? History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes, and if the rhyme holds true, we're nearing the final verses of the dollar's dominance. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who's curious about how money, power, and history always seem to move in cycles. Thanks for watching.